My name is Taylor Knox, and at 33 years old, I watched the U.S. flag drape my grandfather's casket from the other side of a locked cemetery gate because I wasn't allowed inside. Not because I was late, not because I wasn't family, but because my name had been struck from the official family registry. My father made sure of that. He was inside the gate. Of course, General Harrison Knox, 4 stars shimmering on his chest, a symbol of American valor and legacy. My younger brother Caleb stood beside him, his own uniform crisp, boots polished, face solemn, a perfect military son. No one turned their head. No one looked back. I stood there in my old service coat, not in mourning, but in exile. The guard had scanned the list 3 times before saying it plainly. "Sorry, ma'am. Your name's not on the family guest list. Orders from General Knox." Orders. Of course. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I simply watched them fold the flag and hand it to Caleb, not even acknowledging the woman who once sat on her grandfather's lap dreaming of serving just like him. That day, something inside me snapped, not in rage, but in clarity. They think they've erased me, but ghosts don't stay buried forever. Let me take you back, before the fall, before the dishonor that never belonged to me. I grew up in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where every mailbox has a flag and every household recites stories of wartime sacrifice. In our neighborhood, honor wasn't a concept, it was currency. My father wore his military status like a second skin. Everyone called him sir, even off duty. He wasn't just a general, he was a symbol, both feared and revered. My mother, Eleanor Knox, was the Southern ideal, demure, loyal, always 3 steps behind her husband. I used to think she was gentle, but now I know she was obedient. Then there was Caleb, my golden boy younger brother, Dad's perfect successor, the one who never questioned, the one who never had to. But me, I was the curve breaker, not just in grades, in thought, in emotion, in defiance. When I received my acceptance letter to West Point, my father's handshake said I'm proud, but his eyes said, "Don't embarrass me." From day 1 at the academy, I was laser-focused, top 5% in my class, special operations track, fluent in Arabic and Russian by 21. But there was one thing I wasn't prepared for: the double standard. What they called leadership in my male peers was labeled insubordination in me. Assertiveness, tone issues, strategic initiative, lack of chain of command respect. But I played their game until the night I didn't. It happened during a joint training exercise involving classified intel simulation. I was ordered to secure a file by Lieutenant Miller, a legacy officer known more for his last name than his merits. The order violated protocol. I knew it, so I refused. 3 days later, I was summoned to the disciplinary council. Miller had submitted a falsified report. My refusal became insubordination under simulated combat. And just like that, my record, flawless until that moment, was used as kindling to feed a political favor. Guess who sat on that review board? General Harrison Knox. He didn't say a word. He just watched me burn. When I returned home after my expulsion, I still believed it was a misunderstanding, that somehow my father would see the truth. Instead, my mother greeted me with a duffel bag, a train ticket, and a frozen smile. "Your father thinks it's best if you stay out of the public eye for a while. You know, for the family's sake." For the family's sake. She didn't say we love you. She didn't say we believe you. She just said go. I boarded that train and left as Taylor Knox, former cadet, daughter of no one. But don't worry, I didn't vanish. I transformed. You see, disgrace is a prison only if you let it lock you in. I spent years floating beneath the radar cleaning motel rooms, teaching English online, living in a city where no one knew my name. And then, the call came. Her name was Colonel Evelyn Shaw, a retired counterintelligence officer with a voice like rusted steel and a gaze that saw too much. She'd heard about my exit from West Point. She called it a politically timed purge. She offered me something unexpected, a second life. Not in the military, not in academia. In Orion, an off-grid unit operating under Homeland Security's black budget. Their motto, "We clean the mess no one wants to admit exists." I didn't hesitate. Because if the system didn't want me, I'd work with the ones who know how broken it is. At Orion, I was reborn not with rank, but with purpose. I became a data forensics operative, specializing in uncovering hidden manipulations in national defense contracts and promotion chains. I saw how favors shaped careers, how secrets bought silence, how my story wasn't the only one. And I learned to watch, to wait, to listen, for the moment when they would make a mistake. And they did. But it wasn't me who found it first. It was Caleb. Caleb had always been the son I was told to orbit, while I carved my path through grit, code, and clawed respect. He walked on silk. There wasn't a single Thanksgiving where his name didn't come up alongside words like leadership material or born for command. Even when we were kids, Dad used to say, "Taylor, learn from your brother. He doesn't ask questions. He just executes." That was a compliment in our house. Obedience was prized over intelligence, silence over dissent. I used to hate Caleb for playing along until I realized he didn't know any other way to exist. It wasn't loyalty. It was conditioning. But even conditioning has a breaking point. And his came not with a bang, but a whisper buried in a folder marked confidential. I received the file on a rainy Tuesday, encoded through an old secure channel we used during field sim work at West Point. No signature. Just a folder titled Fury Doctrine, a name only Caleb and I knew from a game we made up as kids about sneaking secrets past the generals. Inside, a video still, timestamped 8 years ago, security footage from the West Point Armory, the night before I was expelled. In it, Lieutenant Judd Miller entering the secure data room alone. No simulation team, no oversight. And in the corner of the screen, barely visible, a man in uniform watching him. My father. I sat still for a long time after opening it, not in shock, but in confirmation. The kind that doesn't bring closure, only deeper fury. I messaged back a single phrase, "Why now?" His reply came 12 minutes later. "Because I found Mom crying in the kitchen. Because I asked what happened to you, and Dad said she wasn't worth saving. Because I believed him for too long." It wasn't quite an apology, but it cracked the armor. We met in D.C. a week later, in a quiet corner of a bar with no TVs and bartenders who knew how to forget faces. Caleb looked different, older, of course, but not from age, from carrying something heavy and unspoken. "I've read your file," he said quietly. "The real one, not the one Dad let me see. You were cleared. Miller falsified the entry time. Your protest was valid. The system knew. They scrubbed it for him." I didn't interrupt. I just watched him squirm under the weight of his own guilt. I found it because I was compiling my own promotion report, and I saw my name on a list next to his. I was set to inherit a star, the same one he earned, right after yours disappeared. I leaned back. Let that truth hang in the air. "You were the trade," I whispered. "He sold my future for your rank." Caleb nodded, eyes glazed. "I think I always knew, but I didn't want to know. You were the cautionary tale. I thought I was being protected. Turns out, I was being used too." It would have been easy to hate him then, but I didn't, because he was me just on a different timeline. And maybe, just maybe, we could sync up now. We spent the next few weeks in quiet preparation. He still had access to our father's encrypted archives. I had Orion, together. We built a case, not one of revenge, but exposure. The plan wasn't just to confront our father. That would be too small, too theatrical. We wanted to bring him down the same way he brought me down, by letting the system crush him under its own rules. The twist: we wouldn't go to the press. We'd go inward to the very core of the military justice system, the Joint Counterintelligence Tribunal, a secret body designed to handle high-clearance breaches that could compromise national defense, the kind of place where medals mean nothing if the data says otherwise. We presented our evidence under a sealed operation name, Operation Grave Honor. Every document was signed under immunity agreements, every witness protected. Even Caleb took an oath to testify, despite the fact that it would cost him his promotion. "I'd rather be a man without stars than a son without a soul," he said, voice steady. It was the first time I saw the Knox name in him and didn't flinch. Colonel Evelyn Shaw pulled strings. She had contacts in places that didn't exist on maps, in buildings with no names. She read our file, cross-referenced every signature, every timestamp, every document. After 72 hours, she said, "It's airtight. It won't just shake the building, it'll rattle the bones." That night, I stared at the final draft of the report. I remembered my father's voice from years ago when he told me, "Leadership is knowing when to sacrifice the weak to protect the whole." I used to think that made him pragmatic. Now I knew it just made him a coward in command. And soon, the world he ruled would learn the same. The tribunal summoned him with a classified directive. He thought it was for a commendation review. The irony: he showed up in full uniform, chest covered in medals, spine straight, eyes burning with authority. But that was the last time he'd walk into a room thinking he held control. Because this time, I was the one holding the gavel quietly, from the shadows. And what unfolded inside that tribunal's locked chamber would be the undoing of a legacy built on silence, fear, and sacrifice. But first, I had to look my father in the eyes and ask him one question. Did you ever believe I'd stay quiet? The summons was delivered by hand, an unmarked envelope, stamped with an insignia so obscure it didn't appear on any military database. That's how the tribunal operated. It didn't need recognition. It had power. Power reserved for when the system starts to rot from within. Harrison Knox didn't flinch when he received it. He'd been summoned before, usually to give testimony on classified campaigns or recommend next-gen officers for promotion. He assumed this would be no different. That arrogance, that inability to imagine himself vulnerable, was exactly why this was going to work. The tribunal session was set in a classified location beneath Arlington. Sub-Level 5 access granted only by biometric verification, and a clearance level only 6 people in the country held. That Tuesday, at 0600 sharp, General Knox arrived in full uniform. As always, every ribbon placed precisely, his boots made sharp, confident sounds on the polished concrete floor. When he entered the secure hall, something shifted. He noticed it not right away, but eventually, the guards didn't salute. The panel didn't rise when he entered. Colonel Shaw stood among them, eyes steady, and in the back corner, behind a pane of ballistic glass, I sat in observation, anonymous to everyone but him. He didn't see me at first. He sat straight, facing the tribunal's central panel, presided over by 3 intelligence officials, one of whom once served under him in Afghanistan. The hearing was marked as Internal Integrity Review, Case B3-184. He asked no questions. He assumed it involved someone beneath him. Then they read the name on the subject of investigation. General Harrison Richard Knox. Allegations of falsified testimony, suppression of misconduct reports, unauthorized influence on academy disciplinary proceedings, and illegal advancement of subordinate personnel. He blinked, once, then again. The silence in the room was deafening. The oxygen seemed to shift. I saw it the first crack in his posture. His fingers tapped the chair. Once, twice, controlled, but not calm. The next 30 minutes unfolded like a surgical operation. Evidence, documents, timestamps, command logs, every word, a precise incision, no emotion, just data, as if the system was reclaiming its own justice. Free of sentiment, I watched him try to push back, question the validity of sources, the context of decisions, the fog of war excuses. But then came the nail, the digital footage of Lieutenant Miller entering the data vault unsupervised, followed by a still image of my father silent, complicit, watching through a one-way mirror. He froze. Then slowly turned toward the glass. I knew he couldn't see me clearly. The chamber was polarized, reflections distorted. But he knew. His eyes narrowed, and I swear he smiled, not in triumph, in recognition. He knew who had orchestrated this. Not Caleb, not Shaw, me. What followed wasn't a meltdown. That wasn't his style. My father didn't rage. He recalculated. He leaned forward, voice low and measured. Everything I've done to protect the structure. This isn't betrayal. It's war, and in war, some losses are necessary. Losses. He said it like I'd been a minor cost of battle, like a misfired shell. I wanted to scream, to drag him from that chair and make him feel every damn year I lost. But I didn't, because I didn't need to. The tribunal continued. Testimony from an anonymous witness, Caleb's voice, processed through voice modulation. A detailed account of how performance scores were inflated, how I was framed, how my record had been manually altered by someone with top clearance override clearance only my father held. Then Shaw stood. She hadn't spoken until now, but when she did, the room bent around her words. Sir, I was passed over for command in 1998 because I flagged a falsified promotion trail. You called me a woman too invested in minor details. I let it go. I shouldn't have. But today, I bring it full circle. Then she presented the final document, a chain of internal emails, messages between my father and Lieutenant Miller. Weeks before my hearing, one line stood out like blood on snow. She's brilliant, but she's a liability. Make it clean. Make it clean. That was what I'd been reduced to, a stain to be scrubbed for the sake of his spotless record. The tribunal chair, a man with 30 years of intel service and a chest full of secrets, leaned forward. His voice didn't rise. It dropped. That's how you know the judgment's real. Effective immediately, General Harrison Knox is relieved of command. His clearance is revoked. His promotion recommendations are nullified. He is barred from future involvement in federal defense operations. Further disciplinary proceedings to follow. My father didn't move, didn't blink, just stared straight ahead. I expected him to protest, to bark orders, but instead, he laughed, quietly, just once. You've burned the name, but the uniform still remembers. It was cryptic, maybe meant for me, maybe for himself. Then he stood, nodded once to the panel, and walked out. No cuffs, no escort, just gone. That was the Knox way, no explosions, just implosions, quiet and clean. But as the chamber emptied and the light dimmed, I stayed behind, alone behind the glass, one hand pressed against it, breathing in the silence. I hadn't won. Not yet. The verdict had landed. But justice wasn't about paperwork. Not to me. Because after all this, there was still one person I hadn't confronted. My mother. And the conversation I'd avoided for 8 years would be the one to undo me. Returning to the Knox house wasn't part of the original plan. I never intended to step foot in that pristine mausoleum again, the one that smelled like polished oak and absence. But after the tribunal, Something inside me shifted. I didn't want closure. I needed truth. The kind that doesn't live in documents or judgments. It lives in looks withheld, in dinners eaten in silence, in what was never said. And there was only one person who held the missing piece of it, all my mother. The house hadn't changed. The flagpole still stood tall in the yard, flanked by hydrangeas my mother trimmed with surgical precision. The porch light still flickered slightly, like a heartbeat unsure of its purpose. I knocked once. No answer. Knocked again. Then the door creaked open, and there she was, Eleanor Knox, in her beige sweater, hair pinned, makeup light but perfect. For a moment, she just stared. No gasp, no hug, no collapse, just a flicker in her eyes. Recognition, and then she stepped aside without a word. We sat in the sunroom, the same one where, as a girl, I used to read beside her while she stitched the same hemline over and over, always pretending nothing in our world was coming apart. She poured tea, still that damned hibiscus blend she favored. The clink of china was louder than either of us. "You did it, didn't you?" she said finally, voice soft but steady. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He came home and said nothing, just went to his study and sat for hours. "That sounds about right," I said, eyes never leaving hers. He never had to clean the mess. He only had to shut the door on it. She stirred her tea once, then again, then stopped. "You always had a fire in you, Taylor, even as a child. You were never meant to be contained." There it was a compliment laced with regret, not for what had been done, but for how uncomfortable it made her to watch. "You knew, didn't you?" I asked, quietly. She didn't answer right away. She looked out the window instead, eyes unfocused, like she was watching a film only she could see. Then, not all of it, but enough. That was the crack. The moment where the myth of the unknowing wife dissolved. "Why didn't you stop him?" A beat passed, then two. Her hands trembled, barely. "Because I didn't know how. Because I was raised to serve the name, not the child. Because I thought if we sacrificed one piece, the rest would survive." I stood up. The walls suddenly felt closer. That piece was me. She nodded slowly. "Yes, and I've lived with that weight every day since." The worst part wasn't her admission. It was how normal it sounded, how completely, devastatingly institutionalized she'd become in her own home. I didn't hate her. I couldn't. But I saw her clearly for the first time, not as a mother, but as a bystander who confused inaction with survival. "You cried in the kitchen, didn't you?" I asked. "That night, 8 years ago." Her head tilted, eyes searching. "Caleb told you." "Yes, he heard you, and it cracked something in him." She swallowed. "I couldn't face you. Every time I looked at your room, I saw the girl I didn't protect. I just cleaned around the silence." It was such a perfectly Eleanor thing to say, poetic, restrained, and heartbreaking. I stepped closer, not out of warmth, but for clarity. "You didn't lose a daughter, Mom. You gave her away." She closed her eyes then. I thought that might break her. But instead, she stood, straighter than I'd ever seen her. "And you took her back, not with forgiveness, but with force. Maybe that's what we both needed." It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was an acknowledgement. And in this house, that was worth more than any sorry. I left the house without looking back. Some ghosts don't vanish, they just stop being fed. In the days that followed, things moved fast. The tribunal's ruling went public sanitized, of course. For the press, General retires amid allegations. No mention of me, no glory. Just the quiet fall of a titan. Caleb submitted his resignation. refusing a star he now viewed as stained. He joined a veterans advocacy group, using his name to rebuild where our father once destroyed. As for me, I didn't return to Orion. I didn't need to. I had one last thing to do, one final stone to lay. I founded the Delta Foundation, named after the cruel nickname whispered about me in the Academy's halls, Delta Girl, short for deviant, emotional, liability, trouble, attention seeker. I reclaimed it, turned it into a sanctuary for women erased by the systems they swore to uphold. In our first week, we received 47 inquiries. By the second month, that number tripled. One night, as I locked up the office, I found a package on my desk. No return address. Inside was a worn metal plaque, my original cadet nameplate from West Point Knox. T. The back was scratched, clearly once pried from a wall. Attached, a handwritten note. They took your name off the board, but not out of history. E.S. Evelyn Shaw, always one move ahead, always watching. I stood in the quiet, holding that plate like it weighed 1,000 pounds. But there was still one more person I needed to face, someone I hadn't seen since the tribunal. Because while my father's silence had been strategic, Caleb's silence had once been complicit. The last time I saw Caleb in uniform, it was at the tribunal. His shoulders straight, his oath trembling in his throat. Afterward, he disappeared, no fanfare, no headlines. Just one more soldier slipping into civilian shadows. I didn't reach out. Neither did he. Not for weeks. Maybe because neither of us knew how to speak to each other outside the language of duty, guilt, and legacy. But silence, I'd learned, doesn't erase history, it amplifies it. One Tuesday afternoon, he showed up at my office without warning. No appointment, no message, just a knock on the glass, wearing jeans and a flannel like he was trying too hard to be ordinary. I buzzed him in. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, glancing at the framed mission statement of the Delta Foundation as if trying to understand it. Or me. I wasn't sure if I should come, he said. But you did, I replied, not smiling. He sat, fidgeted, looked down at his hands. They were calloused again, manual labor or nerves. I couldn't tell. Then he spoke. I don't expect forgiveness. I tilted my head. That's convenient. He flinched a little but nodded. I deserve that. There was a long silence between us, dense, almost physical. Then he exhaled. You remember when we were kids and I broke Dad's trophy, the Vietnam one? I blinked. The memory felt distant, fuzzy, but real. You took the blame, he said. Told him it was your fault. Said you knocked it off while dusting. I remembered the sting of that belt. I remembered our mother pretending not to hear. You cried afterward. He continued, not from the hit, from knowing he didn't even question it, just assumed it had to be you. I felt something twist in my chest. I hadn't thought about that day in 20 years. But Caleb hadn't forgotten. He remembered who bore the consequences even then. I let you carry too much, he said, for a long time, and when it mattered most, I said nothing. I watched them erase you. And you let them, I said, voice flat. He didn't defend himself. He just nodded again. I let them. Because I was scared. Because being next in line to the throne felt safer than asking who built the damn thing. That was the line that finally cracked me. Do you think it felt safe for me, I asked, living as a ghost in the system, watching our last name open doors for you while it slammed shut on me? No, he said, I think it probably felt like drowning with your eyes open. And for the first time in years, I saw the boy I grew up with, not the soldier, not the shadow of our father, just Caleb, messy and lost, and trying to atone without knowing how. Why now, I asked. Why tell me all this? He reached into his coat and pulled out a folder. Inside were records names, files, testimonies from other women pushed out of the military under disciplinary discretion, Some had filed reports. Most hadn't, because they knew no one would believe them. Not over decorated men in clean uniforms. Because I don't want to be silent anymore, he said. And because I think I can help. I stared at the folder. Pages of pain, institutionalized, whispers that mirrored my own story. You're too late to save me, I said. But my voice had softened. But maybe not them. He nodded. I'll go wherever you tell me to. Carry boxes, testify, scrub floors. I'm not looking for redemption. Taylor, just purpose. We started working together the next day. No press releases, no reconciliatory hugs, just spreadsheets, phone calls, and late nights building out the infrastructure to expand the Delta Foundation into a national database. Within a month, we connected 6 former officers to legal advocates. By the second month, 2 Senate aides reached out for closed-door hearings. For the first time, the system started listening. And while the world moved forward, I sat down one night in my tiny apartment, still no framed degrees, no medals, no military memorabilia, and wrote a letter. Not to my father, not to my mother, to the young cadet I used to be. You were right to fight. They told you to be quiet, to obey, to protect a name that didn't protect you. But you didn't fold. And, one day, a ghost like you will hear your story and remember her voice too. You weren't a liability. You were a warning. I folded the letter, tucked it inside a notebook labeled 2025 Strategy, and placed it in my drawer. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive in grand speeches or televised reckonings. Sometimes it's just a name, quietly reclaimed. Weeks later, I got a call from Colonel Shaw, her voice still gravel in command. Your brother testified on live record today, told the committee exactly what your father did, named names, no shielding. I felt something shift, not relief, something deeper. You okay? She asked. No, I said, but I'm getting there. There was a pause. Then she said, you know, when I first saw your case, I thought this girl's got the scars, but not the armor. I was wrong. You built it yourself. I hung up and stared out the window. Some battles leave you broken. Others forge you into something unrecognizable. But the ones worth fighting, they turn ghosts into legacy. And now, when people speak the name Knox, they don't just think of a general. They think of a woman who was erased and came back sharper than the blade used against her. Because I didn't just survive the system. I rewrote it.